I call this meeting to order. Morning, everybody. It's
Morning.
January 16th, and we are going to begin the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority Board meeting. I'm going to start with our safety briefing. Lamar?
Madam Chair, Executive Director, members of the board, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, let's begin. We are located at 919 East Main Street on the fourth floor in the Piedmont Room. If you exit the room, make two lefts, look to your left. That's where the women's restroom is located. If you exit the room, make two right turns, look to your right, the men's restroom. Our assignments for the case of any emergencies, and please, when I call your name, please raise your hand. Calling 911, Mary Estelle Douglas. In the back, secondary, Michael Westerman. All right, thank you. CPR, myself, Lamar Bates. All right, secondary, Joan Provides. Meeting first responders, Mike McLaughlin. Thank you. Secondary, Steve Pitter. Thank you. We will call security desk or AED. There's a first aid kit on the table against the wall. Stairwells are located near both restrooms. There's a fire extinguisher near the women's restroom. Also, there's a fire extinguisher near the Tidewater room near the elevator. If we have to evacuate, we will exit the way that we entered. We will assemble at North 9th and Capitol Square. Please ensure that the person to your left and your right here is also there at our assembly area. If you see something, say something, call security, call 911. Also, in case of an active shooter, flee, hide, or fight. Flee, hide, or fight. For those participating remotely, be aware of your phishing emails or scams, any phishing emails or scams. Also, know your medical and evacuation strategies. Are there any questions? All right, excellent. Let's have a safe day.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right. Now, before I leave, please, tripping hazards, please walk around this way. Don't come this way, of course, right here for your safety, please. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Lamar.
Thank you.
So welcome to this meeting. We have had an interesting start to 2025. I know that at the last meeting in January, we had some board members that had to leave before we were finished because we ran a little long. So I wanted to let everybody know I'm going to work really hard to kind of tighten up these meetings a little bit and keep us on time. I think everybody knows that we have to post our agendas ahead of the meeting. And we've built in time for discussion and thoughtful transition for each item. So I'm going to ask each of you to kind of be mindful of that timeline so we can be respectful to all members and help me try to stay on track and stay in time. With that, I want to emphasize that we welcome all questions and comments. We're just going to try really hard to stay within our timelines. A second way we are going to do that today is by transitioning from our roll call voting method to a simultaneous voice vote. There was previous legislation that required votes taken during any meeting conducted through electronic communication shall be recorded by name in roll call fashion, including in the minutes. But legislative changes were made and that language was removed after the pandemic. And so going forward, when appropriate, for attendance and certain other areas, we'll have to take a roll call, but when appropriate, we're going to take a simultaneous voice vote. And then Mary Estelle will call the roll for any participating virtually. And for those participating virtually, please use the tools online to raise your hand. If you have a question, we want to make sure and be mindful to hear your comments and questions as well. So with that, I'm going to ask Mary Estelle to take a roll call attendance, please.
Ms. Bushu?
Here.
Mr. Cardwell?
Here. Here.
He's remote. Mr. Crawford?
Here.
Mr. Dalton?
Here.
Mr. DeLandro?
Here.
Ms. Dorsch?
Here.
Ms. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Flowers?
Here.
Mr. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Maestri,
Here.
Ms. Moses Ned,
Here.
Mr. Payne, Ms. Reinhardt,
Here.
Mr. Watkins. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. And moving on to agenda item number 5. I don't believe we have any public comment. No one has signed up. Last call. Okay, no public comment today. Thank you very much. We're going to move to item number 6. I assume everyone has had a chance to review the November 19th, 2024 VPRA meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Mary Estelle, would you call the roll for our virtual members?
Mr. Cardwell,
Yes.
so he's Mr. Cardwell, if you can hear me, if you could just respond in the messages, I can see your chat.
Okay, I will do that. And
Oh, he's giving me a thumbs up. Um,
That works.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Ms. Reinhardt.
Yes. We're able to record their votes?
Well, I can record Mr. Cardwell's because, and Ms. Reinhardt, yes. I got them all. Mr. Cardwell, Mr. Jordan, and Ms. Reinhardt. Thank you all.
Perfect. Thank you. Agenda item number 7, board committee membership. Does anybody have any questions about the new committee membership that is listed and that includes our new members? And we're also appointing new vice chairs. Is there any discussion about that resolution before we take a vote? No? Do I have a motion to approve the new board committee membership?
moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Mary Estelle. Would you call the roll for our virtual members?
Thank you, Mr. Cardwell. Ms. Reinhardt? Oh,
Aye.
yes, thank you. And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Thank you all. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, I have a question. So, I'm sorry, I don't have on my iPad is powering up, so I don't have any notes in front of me. But do we still just have the 2 committees, compensation and finance?
That is correct. Personnel and compensation and finance and audit.
Is there a reason why we don't have more than 2? It seems to me I've never been on a board where there's only been 2 committees. I mean, I think we could have a legislative committee. I think that would be good. I think a governance committee. I don't know if I need to make a motion, but maybe that's something we should look at for the next meeting, is to look at other committees. Because I think it's real important for board members to be engaged. And just having the 2 committees, I know if you're not on the committee, you can listen to the committee, but I think it would be a good idea to get board members more involved, to have the other committees, like a governance to, keep up on the bylaws, and of course a legislative, I think would be a good idea. That's just my opinion. But I offer that up to review.
Thank you, Ms. Bishu. Obviously, between meetings, we can certainly have additional discussion. And if there's any questions or comments or proposals or ideas on this item, if you email them to me, we can disperse that to the entire board and maybe plan to have a further discussion on this next meeting.
Yeah, be a good idea.
I agree with Sandy that at least it's good to even look at the parity with the other independent authorities.
Sure.
Right? Is that if there are subcommittees beyond just personnel.
Bylaws too. So just curious.
Yeah, I served on NVTA, and everybody was on it. Everybody. That's the Virginia Transportation Authority.
Mhm.
It gets the funding from the gas tax, the sales tax, additional sales tax, and I just think it's just good. It's good because it brings the board members together, and it's just, I think it's good governance.
Thank you for that input. So if anyone has ideas on that between now and our next meeting, please shoot them through email and we'll share with the entire board, and we can pull some information together for the next meeting to give an update on parity and proposals and what ideas have been thrown out there for discussion. Thank you. we're going to move on to item number 8, our executive director's report.
Super. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I noticed that I am starting ahead of schedule, so I don't end on time.
Look at
That's
that.
entirely on me. So, good morning, members of the board. It's great to be here. It's actually an exciting day. We have a lot of good news and exciting progress to share, so I'll get right into it. We, with the transition of the administration on the federal side, wanted to make sure that we got our Fed State Partnership Grant of $729 million obligated, and that was done in December. So that grant has been signed. We have agreement terms that we're very happy with, that VPRA is very happy with, and we're now comfortable that our phase 1 and phase 2 projects are fully funded and that money is not at risk. So that was a great news event that happened in December. We also completed our Alexandria office conference room expansion. So that's, you're looking at the pictures of where we will have our May board meeting. So we were excited about that as well. Getting to the point where we needed bigger conference rooms and it just was cost prohibitive to go out and then. So that's another good news update. Here's our update on our AIP goals. I highlighted the ones that I want to talk about, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Ridership, you'll see in a couple slides, we actually in December had higher ridership than the previous December, which was the case for a long, long time. But then as we talked about at the last meeting, we dipped a little bit. In December, we once again are ahead of the prior year. So while we're behind our goal, we had a goal to increase ridership by 3%. We're behind that goal by about 3%. So our difference to goal is we're behind last year by 3%. Our difference to goal is about 6%, but it's trending in the right direction. Cost recovery, on the other hand, because our ticket prices were so high, revenue has been very, very good, and cost recovery is much higher than we expected. We expect to see over the next few months ridership to continue to go up and that cost recovery to go down slightly as the ticket prices go down. But that's trending in the right direction. We, in the Long Bridge, we completed the obligation of the Fed State Partnership Grant that I already talked about. So that was done within the time limit. And then we also, in November, completed the sale of the Virginia line back to Norfolk Southern and closed on Seminary Passage in December. So all of those are good news. We continue to move forward. None of the other goals are at significant risk. You see the big one today is board approval for the Long Bridge South package. Hoping we'll approve that today and we'll have a lot more conversation about that. I would be remiss if I didn't point out the fact that as we talk today, we have a lot of good news and progress to report. Projects that last time were 30% are now 60% design. Projects that were 60% are 90% design. All projects are getting closer to construction. Construction is going to have significant impacts on ridership and on train service. So I want to just prepare folks over the coming months. We're going to be talking about service adjustments and how we can make sure, just like when you see construction on a highway, you're excited about getting that 5th lane, but for the 2 years of construction, lanes number 3 and 4 are closed down a lot. So we are going to hit some bumpy roads. We all just need to go into those wide open. Thankfully, we've got great partners in VPRA. We've got great partners in Amtrak, CSX. So we will work with the community and work with partners to make sure that people know when the service is going to change. Quick administrative updates. We get this every month, just the employee count. No hires in January. We've got 63 full-time employees and 8 postings that are out there. Sent to the board last week or earlier this week, just an update of the org chart and a conversation about the staff augmentation consultants that we have. Again, we'll continue to update folks as it goes along. Here's the breakout by gender, race, and age. You need to be pleased with the balance, with the diversity. One of the things that we have worked very hard on from day one is to ensure that when we bring folks into the organization, that they are a good fit for VPRA and we are a good fit for them. Culture is right behind safety is our top priorities, and we continue to grow that culture. You'll hear a little bit more from Ms. Rabanis later today just on the progress on how we're doing on that. Here's our administrative budget. Nothing really of note to talk about. We're in pretty good shape through the first half of the fiscal year.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, DJ, but could we have what the FY24 budget, the budget and the actuals at the end, what it looked like, and then have the 25.
So
we can compare.
Going forward, we can add the previous year budget.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. budgeted and then actual.
We'll put that in there. And of
Thank
course,
you.
it's in previous executive director reports, but we'll put it.
Yeah, but I don't want to go dig for it.
No, and you shouldn't. You can. You're welcome to, but you shouldn't be.
I don't dig.
that's-
Nor patch.
You know, we'll,
I'm lazy.
we're happy to do that.
Thank you.
And just contracting updates at every board meeting, we update you all on any contracts that are above $250,000. Since the last report, there are two. One is permit coordination and design in the Richmond Labor Facility. That was about $1.8 million to WSP. And then a project that you'll hear more about later today, the Franconia Delort third track. We have Jacobs on board to help us do the Fairfax County sewer relocation, which, as we talked about last time, we will be reimbursed for it in the future. No budget adjustments in December. And that is the update on the administrative side. Passenger service, I alluded to this before. Ridership has gone up. However, in January, the first 7 days of January, we had 23 trains canceled due to a winter storm. Those 23 trains are about 5% of the whole January universe. So ridership closely. The good news is that we worked well with Amtrak and we let folks know ahead of time. It's always a debate when storms are coming in. Do you want to run trains through bad weather, knowing that you'll likely delay them, likely that the crews will be exhausted, that you may have mechanical problems due to the weather, and then you take 3 or 4 days to recover? Or do you park the trains for a day, let the crews rest, and then when the weather subsides, then go full bore and have every train there running on time? Amtrak, I think, has evolved, and they do a good job with that balance. What we did see is the 5th, the 6th was a huge cancellation day. The 7th, we had canceled 5 trains, and 8th, 9th, and 10th, we saw huge ridership. So we continue to watch that every time that there's a weather event, and we work with Amtrak to do what, quote unquote, is optimal.
AJ, who makes a call on that for canceling a train for our service?
It depends. Amtrak consults with us, but they really have the final word. And then it gets even more sloppy. That's not the right word. It's more complicated because a lot of times the freight railroad, CSX or Norfolk Southern, will say, well, wait a second, we're not going to let you run. Because we've had situations where, especially if it's a heavy snow, they're concerned that there could be trees on the line that have come down, and the freight railroad will often say, no, no service today. So it's not an easy answer.
Did it happen with this last storm? Did the freight say
I
off our tracks?
Do you know, Jeremy, if the freight's called it? I think Amtrak called it this time.
It was Amtrak.
Yeah, this time.
And they ran it by.
Yeah, and candidly, they run it by us, and we support it. I think if we don't support it, we'd probably have a hard fight with them. But they at least let us know, which is good. Now, that's a conversation that we're going to have, and not today. But as we have the owned infrastructure, one of the many things we have to do is come up with maintenance standards, and that decision will become ours. And in the future, I want to say not so distant, but it's pretty far away, but it's coming fast. So we'll have to have those same conversations and be part of that partnership discussion when things like this happen. And as you see there, Amtrak provided alternate transportation where possible. We had some buses that took place. This comes out wrong too. Not a great day. We got less bad feedback, I think, from passengers because they knew ahead of time. And we didn't have the complaints on Twitter. I've been sitting in the station for 4 hours, So this one turned out okay. Upcoming weekend service impacts. We talked about this in the fall, October, November. We had some service impacts because of the work that Washington Union Station needed to get done, capital work. We're going to have some more work at Washington Station in January, February, and then as far out in May, although that schedule is likely to change. Just good for Amtrak to continue to upgrade the infrastructure up there and ensure that it's as reliable as possible. Here's the ridership chart. This is overall Virginia monthly ridership. As I said earlier, the November ridership. I said December, but I meant November. We don't have December numbers yet. November ridership was above the previous year's November, which is a good trend. We're happy with that. We expect that to continue. December indications for the first couple weeks of December were that ridership was also very, very high. We'll usually get that about the 21st or 22nd of the month, the final December numbers. And we'll include those in the final executive director's report that we sent out in January. I'll just go through these quickly. Here's the route by route. Every single route was ahead of the prior year with the exception of, like I guess, half of them were. The Norfolk route wasn't, and the Richmond route wasn't. Part of the Richmond route lagging is the fact that we've got the third Norfolk train and we've got the Newport News train. So a lot of folks switch as the schedules change slightly. People that used to be on a Richmond train that are going from DC to Fredericksburg or DC to Ashland. Maybe last time they rode on a Norfolk train. This year they're riding on a Richmond train just because it's better for their schedule. So it's really better to look at those three, Norfolk, Richmond, and Newport News, kind of as a group, because a lot of people ride those trains and they're agnostic as to whether it's Norfolk, Newport News, or Richmond because they're not going that far.
I'm curious, will the final new casino construction in Norfolk affect our Norfolk traffic, do you think, or?
It will likely affect the traffic as people are going there. It also will affect, there's a work going on in the parking lot right here. So
Yeah.
there's disruption going on. But yes, it's expected that there are many people who, in DC, you can go.
It'll be a positive, so yeah, in that regard.
When you can get off a train and walk to a destination,
Yeah.
that's a big plus.
DJ, we know yet where the parking for Amtrak will be with the new casino? Because I've been told both things. I've been told it'll be right there by the building, which would be great. Then I've been told it's going to be in a parking garage.
So my understanding is there's going to be limited parking right by the building, and then there'll be overflow parking in the parking garage.
So both are true.
We have some demands that we're asking, or not demand, we're asking for some considerations as a call today between Amtrak and the city of Norfolk.
Okay. It would be great if we could keep it closer to the building. That was what we were happy about.
Yeah, and look, a lot of the people that ride the train have mobility challenges, and
Yeah.
so to have them a couple blocks away in a parking garage doesn't make any sense.
Right. And we have that contract that we agreed. I think it's like 130 some parking spots.
Yeah, I
And
don't know the exact number, but
yeah, it's high and there's always a lot of cars there.
Agreed.
So it could impact it if you have to walk to them.
here's just on-time performance. We're in pretty good shape across the board. There was one place where it was not good, and this is Newport News. And this is, we've got 2 Newport News trains, so it's 2 a day. We had a couple trespasser incidents where there were police activity. Well, it's on police activity where trains were stopped for a period of time because someone was hit by the train or because there was an accident. When you lose 4 trains, because you lose one and then you miss the one on the other side, when you only have 2 trains a day, it takes a big hit to the monthly. So we don't think that that's a recurring problem. Just think that was an unfortunate month in November. Now, that being said, there continues to be money that goes into grade crossing improvement. In fact, there was just one in Suffolk, I believe, that they gave money to where they're going to be improving that. So when we have situations where there are a lot of trespasser situations, we work with the FRA and the freight railroad to improve the crossing. Washington, Norfolk, not really much to talk about. Continued on the same path. Washington, Richmond, pretty much the same. Freight commuter train interference. This is the chart. This is actually another good news chart. If you look at the ridership month by month, November, this compares our ridership, the Virginia ridership, to other big states, Pennsylvania, New York, and North Carolina. In November, our ridership was higher than all of the other states. And that's fantastic, especially since we only have 16 trains and Pennsylvania and New York both have more than we do. So it continues to show that we are attracting riders and keeping them, which is good news. Cost recovery I talked about earlier, 89%. That was a big jump. We'll probably see that drop as the ticket prices have gone down a little bit to increase ridership.
What does that mean exactly? I mean, I know what cost recovery means, but I mean, how is that measured? Maybe is a better question. What variables and how is that? I mean, how does that? I mean, does Amtrak pay us for? I mean, how does that work? That cost?
So I'm going to explain it in a very simple basis. Then in each month in the executive director's report, there's a chart that breaks it out. And so we show you month by month. But basically, if the cost recovery on the numerator is the revenue that comes in from the tickets.
Okay.
And then on the bottom, the denominator is the cost of running the trains, the cost of the crews on the trains, the cost of the station staff and those kinds of things. And then also our administrative cost for VPRA.
Okay. But do we get those numbers from Amtrak then? The cost of running the train and the revenue from the ticket.
So the revenue from the tickets we get from Amtrak and cost of running the train we also get. That's what they bill us for running the train.
Okay. So they bill us.
So there's a There's an agreement called the 209 agreement.
Right.
And that sets exactly what they're allowed to charge us for at what rates. And that's what they bill us for.
And so then the recovery is we gain, or that's what we get back.
So and these numbers are wrong.
Okay.
For example, last month we paid Amtrak $95 to run all the trains.
Right.
And VPRA had $5 of administrative costs. So our total costs were $100. Okay. And we had $89 worth of ticket revenue.
I gotcha. Okay.
So 89% of our costs overall, Amtrak running the trains and our administrative costs were covered by ticket revenue. The other 11% came from the Commonwealth Rail Fund that we subsidize.
Sure. So Amtrak does that for every state?
Amtrak does that for every state, and they do it for themselves as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So for their long distance trains.
Right. Exactly. That's
they put that. And I will tell you, 89% is a great number.
Yeah, it's good.
Percent is
Yeah.
or 109% is a better number. But even Amtrak's own service, you're hard pressed to find a line that's recovering 89%.
I was just going to ask that, DJ. I was going to say, I would assume that this is probably amongst even the other state supported routes. This is, probably leading, right, in terms of 89% cost recovery.
If it's not leading, it's in the top two.
Thank you.
Steve, I made a mistake. Correct me, Steve.
You did not make a mistake. Perfect. I just wanted to add, because the 89% kept you thrown out. Our goal is 70%. That's what we think is a reasonable level to attain. So don't want people to leave here thinking 89.
Exactly. And as I said earlier, part of the reason why 89 is such a great number. And look, we'd like to be over 100, but given the ridership comeback from COVID and given the cost, and we think 70 is more reasonable. 89 is what it is because ticket prices were higher than we expected, and that's why the ridership took a dip. And so as that evens out, you'll see that coming down.
So DJ,
Go ahead.
Quickly before we move on, in the future, as we continue to do so well, we may want to reevaluate our goal.
Right. And so what we do is when we prepare the budget, and we'll talk more about this at the May meeting, because this is really akin to the operating budget, not the capital budget. So Ms. Pashua, I'm sorry, I should clarify something I said. I gave an example that added up to $100 of costs. Right? That doesn't include the capital project costs. So when we have Long Bridge going to $1 billion, that's not part of this. This is just
Yeah.
When we present you the operating budget, the final operating budget in May to approve that goes into effect for July, that's going to say, here's what we think our ticket revenue is going to be. Here's what we think the Amtrak costs are going to be based on the agreement. And here's what we think our costs are going to be. So that calculates into a cost recovery of probably 72% at that point. And then we'll set the goal based on that estimate.
Understood. Thank you.
In fact, you'll see, now I'm going way too long. You'll see last year our actual was 72%. And we said, that's aggressive based on what we know is coming up. We don't think we could hit 72 again. That's why 70 was our goal. And then, of course, we proved ourselves wrong.
Okay.
All right, capital projects updates. You want to do this, Mike?
It's up to you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do it. And I can just interrupt you.
This is going to be very quick because most of these projects I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to focus on them much because we're talking about them later today. So I'm just going to highlight only a couple of quick things. I mentioned earlier, $729 million for that grant obligation. Yes, grant obligation. Yes.
Wait, man, let me get rid of this.
You're speaking, sir.
Did receive notice of the award a year ago. A lot of work goes into an agreement with the FRA. I give kudos to Michael Weston and others who have worked on that agreement and getting that grant obligated. I do want to point that out. Again, we're going to talk about Long Bridge North and South later on today. On the South, again, we'll bring in a proposal for you today to consider the contract. So we're going to talk about that at length later on today. Alexandria report check. A couple quick things I want to point out is that we're 100% design and we're in NEPA reevaluation. We're really close. What does that mean? We've talked about when you have, you get your environmental clearance, but then later on you find out the right of way you need to purchase might be outside. So disturbance, could be some other matters. You got to get the NEPA reevaluation, get it cleared again. You'll see in a slide later, we're expecting that in February, might even come in January. So that's good news. We're moving forward. And this is one of our next projects to go into the night, going to go into construction really soon. We're excited about this project. Franconia Springfield bypass, again, we're going to talk about this again later today. Also want to point out, you'll see the variance. We're actually at year-to-date actual what we budgeted. So we're the teams, the consulting teams, the contractor teams are moving along at a quick pace we like to see. Franconia Lorton third track also associated. We're also going to talk about this later again today as well. Project that we do have to work with the Army Corps of Engineers and Fort Belvoir on some issues working through there because it comes right near Fort Belvoir. But again, this is also moving along with design. Some parts of design are 60%, some parts are 90%. New River Valley. I do want to stop and talk about this maybe instead of 10 seconds a minute. This is moving along. I want to show the picture on the right. While construction hasn't begun, early works construction has. What does that mean? Norfolk Southern is currently using the old depot that we plan to turn into the train station, but they need to house their people and their materials somewhere. So at the northern end of their yard, they're building this new facility. It's actually moved beyond this. This picture is a couple weeks old. So they're almost done with their new maintenance facility. So they're clearing the way, getting out of the way for construction that Norfolk Southern is delivering. Recall, Norfolk Southern is delivering the construction for this, and they have incentives to do so. Something else I want to point out is that Norfolk Southern has received all the bids, and they actually have selected a contractor. However, they're still working through the administrative process of that, so we can't yet say who the contractor is. Just like we work through administrative process with our contractors, they're notifying their procurement partners of that. So that's exciting news that they have selected a contractor for the pocket track and the platform at the Cambria Christians Workstation and also the Radford layover facility about 10 miles west of there. Lastly, want to point out that we have to work with the various state departments, one of which is Department of Historic Resources. The Cambria Station is a historic depot, so we have to work with them. They have been great to work with, and we've gotten help from our administration in making sure that it's a priority for them. We hope to get the memo done soon, and as soon as that memo is done, we can begin construction. We actually got clearance, begin tree clearing, as long as it's not at the actual Cambria Station. So construction will begin in March, and we plan to have a ceremony, and of course, all of you will be. I'm moving fast. Any questions? Pretty much done. I'm adhering to the chair's request. Move along swiftly. I do want to, we show this every month, the boundary surveys. We've talked before about this. You have to do the boundary surveys before you do right-of-way acquisition. Of course, in there, I mentioned NEPA reevaluation, then move to construction, and it shows that February date in yellow for Alexandria Ford Track. We also received concurrence just yesterday from CSX for Fairfax County right-of-way, which includes bypass and Franconia Lorton. So getting their concurrence, if you recall, they have their val maps. We trued up with the survey. Getting their concurrence is a big step. So that was a big step, getting concurrence for the projects in Fairfax County.
Michael, is that saying that survey issue is over? I mean,
for Fairfax, for the
yeah.
Fairfax, the projects in Fairfax, yes.
Okay.
We're still moving the other projects further south. We're still working on.
Oh, so it's still ongoing.
It's still ongoing. We're doing it
along the line.
Project area by project area.
I didn't realize it was that big. I thought it was just in one kind of central.
No, we're doing the surveys for the whole county.
Yeah, everything we purchased. And let me, so yes, the survey issue that we brought to your attention a few months ago, we talked about, it's still ongoing, but we have a good plan in place and everyone is adhering to the plan, whether it's the county, whether it's CSX, whether it's the survey folks. So back then we said, look, here's a problem and here's our plan to fix it or to address it. And we all have stayed on that plan.
CSX has been a good partner. We met with them, the leadership, and they promised the resources they'll bring, meaning their staff, to make sure that we get the surveys approved, and they just did their adhering to that agreement.
And are they paying for the surveyor? Because it was
they pay for the surveyor on their side to oversee it. We pay our surveyor as well.
Okay.
Yeah, this was never a money issue.
Okay.
So that is all I had. Any further questions?
Right along, just update, and these are November numbers before I start. And there's nothing that's unusual here. You see these each month, sectors or directors report. I do want to point out here, you'll see a slight uptick in the balance of funding. We had a decline when we bought the Manassas line back in September. And you see that the last couple of months, the balance that we have is growing. We've anticipated that going through the end of this year, that balance should grow and hopefully get to around $500 million that we have. Next slide, you recall from past meetings that we did take some of our funding and we put it out over a 4-year window to invest, to lock in the rates when they were a little higher. And you see here that we're starting to show a little bit of a gain because the Federal Reserve did lower rates recently, and we're getting to the point as we move. Well, move forward, you'll see the point that rates are now below where we've locked in. And that's gain shows, and also the LGIP continues to out that fund rate. So we're in a good position. That being said, talk about liquidity here because we don't want to lock funds in and then not have the funding available to pay for our capital projects, which is why we have the funds to begin with, not to invest. We're in a really good shape here because we still have about $178 million in the LGIP fund, which is a 30-day window is what that actual fund invests in, but we can take those funds out every day. So really good shape from the liquidity standpoint, still feel good about those longer term, the tail you see there, the longer term investments that they're going to match to our needs. And finally, the last thing here, this is actually showing return, which is the third, these principles go in order. So it's maintain our balance, our liquidity, and then return on the investment. It's the third most important principle. You see here, you see the line starting to trend down, which is the benchmark. That's the Fed's fund rate. And it's starting to get to where LGIP's been exceeding that. And our managed funds now, I looked at just today, the Fed's fund rate is around 4.3%. So we're actually now exceeding that with our managed funds also. That I'll gladly take any questions.
Hearing none. Thank you.
I yield my time.
Thank you so much. We're doing really well on time. We're going to move to agenda item number 9. Mr. Latimer, can you give us a service performance update, please?
Yes. Okay. Good morning. I've got more time and I'm up front, so feel free to ask questions. We're not today. So I'll start with an overview since we have some new board members. I'll go through the typical on-time performance kind of scorecards that I've talked about. Performance initiatives related to the scorecards because we're always trying to push performance in the right direction. And then I'll cover some other things, new equipment and service facilities. Those are not going to be graphic chart heavy. And then Zach Collier on my team is going to talk about the Rider program and how you all can help us with our customer service standards program. So I thought I would just start just with the picture of Virginia. So looking at the service in Virginia, it largely is north-south in orientation, and it runs kind of on the east and west sides of the state. So sometimes, I get the question, can I take the train from Roanoke to Richmond? And well, if you did, you have to do kind of like there is no hypotenuse. You have to go north and you have to come south. So this is largely because of our geopolitical orientation to the Northeast Corridor, where we're just pulling the Northeast Corridor trains down into Virginia. So one of the things that I've been asked in the past, and I'll forgive former government affairs at Amtrak, he said, what's going on down in Virginia? There's all this growth. And other states are starting to follow suit now. But for a while, Virginia was really this star of wow, we're the ones who are expanding. And it really all started in 2006. We had a rail enhancement fund program. And that was actually more freight based. And so what I like people to remember is our passenger rail program success started with a foundational relationship with our freight railroads. They understood the investments that were needed in Virginia. We understood the investments. The REF fund was that first foray into major investments in a privately owned network. And then in 2009, October, we started the Lynchburg service where we pulled a train down from Washington, D.C., used the equipment that was terminating in Washington. The ridership of the Lynchburg train far exceeded our expectations. We're on. And then we started in 2010, a similar on the east side of the state in Richmond, and we saw similar success. And then during the administrative years at DRPT, we saw one of our largest gains in dedicated funding, which was something the envy of many states to see dedicated funding for passenger rail service. at that time called the Intercity Passenger Rail Operating and Capital Fund. We had that, we started to gain momentum. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but as you can see in 2012, under Ms. Drake, we took the Richmond train down to Norfolk in lightning speed time. We did that with state funds. And then let's move forward to 2022. We had the first additional services added because of the Transforming Rail Initiative. You can see down there in the middle on the bottom line, we added a third Norfolk train and a second Roanoke train. And so we have more plans for expanding service. So a lot has happened to get us to where we are today. We're building on a lot of momentum. As we add Amtrak service, which are the orange lines that are bookending this, we have to remember there's already very robust service in Northern Virginia with Virginia Railway Express. So 16 trains or 8 daily round trips on the Manassas line and on the Fredericksburg line. So whenever we are scheduling our service, we are not just beholden to what the Northeast Corridor offers us to pull down into Virginia, but we have to thread the needle through VRE service to make sure it's complementary. The VRE service right now, looking on the far right of this chart here in December 24, hit about 83%, which is a recovery from a bit of a plateau during the summertime. We had a rough summer, but 90% is the goal. So even though we see the 83% as an improvement, you can see that we have not gotten above 90% for over a year. So this is one of the goals. Do you have anything you want to add?
The data speaks for itself, and I concur that it's not our preferred reliability number there. So, but I'm sure you're going to talk about how we're going to get there.
Yes. Many more slides.
That I really like that historical slide you did. We're in that history. When was PREA passed? The passenger
2013.
No, 2008. PREA was passed.
The legislation was passed in 2008. It took effect for us in 2013.
The agreement, the actual cost allocation policy, the law was passed in 2008 and the policy was finalized in 2013. And that's when it took off.
Okay. Would you say that added a lot, DJ, to passenger rail, particularly Amtrak taking off the PREA law? Would you say?
Yes, I would say that it empowered the states to be accountable for their service, and it required Amtrak to let the states be accountable. Before that, just for folks for history, before 2008, when PREA was passed, and PREA is, I get this wrong every time.
Passenger rail, yes.
Investment and improvement. Investment.
Yeah.
I get the eyes messed up, but that's what it is. Before that was passed, there were some states that paid a ton of money for their service and got a little bit of service. And there were some states paid nothing for service and got a lot of service. And what was intended to do was put the control in the state's hand. And it took from 2008 to 2013 to get all the states to agree on that policy. But once that cost allocation policy was implemented, it absolutely put control. So we can go to Amtrak today and say, hey, we want a third Norfolk train. Hey, we want a second Roanoke train.
But we would bear that cost.
Right.
Part of it.
Whatever's not the 11% of that cost this year.
Thanks for that. This is a really good slide, though. Thank you. Like that.
So, and I'll just one last item on the VRE slide. You'll see the trains there on the right, the on-time trains, the top 5. We had a couple that got to the 100% mark. The morning trains tend to perform best, and then the afternoon congestion, the southbound in the afternoon often struggle the most. So in addition to the VRE network that you saw on that we call these the subway style maps, this is one of our Amtrak routes. So the orange ones are long distance routes. They predate anything Virginia did, and they benefit our service. They go to far beyond places like New Orleans, Florida, Chicago, and up into the Northeast. And then you have the Carolinian Blue, the North Carolina state-supported train that comes through midday, both northbound and southbound in Virginia. And then our service that we're pulling down from the Northeast Corridor that we call Northeast Regionals are the Navy Blue trains. And there you can see DJ mentioned earlier about how the Norfolk and Newport News trains benefit Richmond. And you can see how well served Richmond is because of how everything kind of comes together. But as you also notice, everything hits Alexandria. And this is also where everything for VRE comes together.
So, Jeremy, if I may, Jeremy talked about the orange trains, which are the Amtrak long distance trains. According to PREA, any train that goes more than 750 miles is a long distance train, and Amtrak has to pay the whole cost of that. And I noticed folks around the table saying, wait a second, the law was passed in 2008. We didn't have the policy in 2013. Well, here's why. What that policy does is that policy says that, hey, in Charlottesville, Amtrak pays my $100 for station staff. We had to work out how much of that $100 was a Virginia cost for the state-supported trains, and how much was for the long-distance trains that Amtrak has to pay the full cost of? And it's a detailed conversation, because you can say, well, half of the riders are state-supported, half are long-distance, so you should split the cost in half. Well, no. There's checked baggage there, and there's not checked baggage on the state-supported train. So why are we paying for the state? And those conversations took place across 20 states, and that's why it took so long to get the policy in place. But what the policy does is it very fairly, and I believe this to be true, and I believed it when I worked for Amtrak, it very fairly allocates the cost based on what your state-supported trains use. For example, and I'm stealing Jeremy's time, sorry. Fredericksburg has VRE trains. You don't need to, if you're a commuter, know a lot about the station. I mean, you basically get on the train, you get off the train. So they shouldn't pay a lot for the station. Long distance folks should pay a lot for the station. And so breaking out the cost allocation was and in places continues to be a huge debate. Sorry, just context.
Thank you.
So how are Northeast Regionals performing? Typically, they do fairly well compared to long distance, but less than VRE simply because of the distance. More distance, we have more time to get off schedule. So right now we're kind of plateaued in 60 percentiles. We were actually doing better this time last year at 73%. I'll go over some of the initiatives we have. Some trains perform much better than others is one of the things I want to understand. So our morning northbounds often do very well, and the southbounds coming out of Washington, DC, that congestion tends to do the worst. And so we will continue to address that Washington Union Station issue and hopefully see everything start to move up. But we just have some other initiatives as well. Long distance, the longest distance trains also have the most time to trip up over themselves, but also we're doing better this time in 2023 at 67.9% versus the 55.9% that they were this past December. And I'll talk a little bit more about one of the trains that is at the bottom of the list there on the right-hand side. What was the Silver Star has become the Floridian, and that performance has degraded a little bit with the switch in schedule. So these are the major initiatives we have, in addition to some other trains that we're watching individually. But CSX heat orders, we're going to do a summer pilot. We're going to adjust schedules to anticipate the CSX heat order being called throughout the summertime. And then we're going to align that with VRE, who does theirs from Memorial Day to Labor Day as well. Delays at Washington, noticeable improvements. We want to see that momentum continue and start to see that benefit show up in Virginia. And then planned work, we're coordinating with Amtrak. We have a lot of work on the horizon, VRE and TRB and CSX. So probably more on that future board meetings very soon to talk about what we're going to do, and then some service changes that we're monitoring to see that we don't just degrade service when we switch schedules. On the heat orders, just as a quick reminder, when CSX's heat order policy, CSX has one of the most conservative heat order policies. So from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., when a heat order is called, if our schedules are unadjusted, there is no way that train is going to achieve its schedule between 1 and 7 p.m. because everything has to slow down. So we started tracking this several years ago, and we can see the summertime is the worst of it. So Memorial Day to Labor Day is when we put in a summer schedule to try and accommodate this. Not every day has a heat order. So if you had too much time, then all of a sudden all the trains are sitting around, and that can also work.
Bless you.
A number of our trains there on the right, you can see whether they're coming from Norfolk, Newport News, or Richmond. We're not doing this with the Roanoke trains because they largely travel on the Norfolk Southern side. So it's mainly the ones that are going through the RFP. And so we will add that time. Amtrak has been adjusting these times. We're adding 2 trains that were affected by heat orders that were not part of it last year. And then this is just it's a function of certain things. We took the pen on it first last year. Amtrak liked that schedule, and they took the pen on it first this year based on what we did. And so we're negotiating that now. We want to have things buttoned up by March to have that in the system so that customers don't experience much change in what they already bought. Talking about Washington, the good news story, Washington since July has seen a 74% decrease in the delays, and this is a concerted effort by Amtrak. So you can see it dropping from 4,500 on the southbound delays to about 1,100 for the past 2 months. And you can see in orange, the servicing delays continue to be the bulk of it. On the right side, you can see the gray area are all the trains that were affected. You can see that this has been a benefit to all the trains as the numbers have come down. And you can see at the very bottom, that's train 93. It continues to have a big piece of the pie, especially as everything else has come down. 93 is a stickler and struggling. What we've learned from Amtrak is 93 has an engine change in New Haven, Connecticut that is often putting it behind schedule. In the spring, we are planning on swapping out 93 for another slot and hopefully improve that on time.
Can you go back to this idea with like servicing, right? Is that do these types of delays go into the for lack of a better term, service accountability metrics that we have with Amtrak, or is this something different because it's in Washington? I wasn't sure if like is Washington considered part of Virginia state supported bit, or is it still on the Amtrak side? So it doesn't, even though it's a delay, it doesn't really count as a delay when it comes to like the accountability that we have on Amtrak.
It's a good question. So when it arrives in Washington, it is still into Washington is an Amtrak train.
Yeah.
When it departs, it becomes a Virginia train.
Yeah.
However, our system does have a method that we negotiated with Amtrak. It's called through train performance.
Yeah.
And so they are going to report through train performance. And I forget exactly what it is. I think it's around 75% they have to hit. So we'll be monitoring that. So they have continuous improvement efforts to get through train performance up.
Do you know where they are right now in terms of on that? Because I think that's actually probably like a very important metric, right? That through train performance is especially because it's like this.
Right. I don't know offhand what it was, but we can get that for you. Thanks. And so to that point, the engine swap there here on the left-hand side, that remains one of the largest items to address. You can see plan work at the top. We want to get the work for things show up on here. And I know VPRA does too. So we're working on that, but engine swap will continue to be one of the continuous improvement efforts we want to watch closely. So late engine swaps there on the right continue to be at the top. Crews arriving late on trains doesn't mean they showed up late for work. It just means that train that they needed to switch to another train, something came in and they were delayed because they didn't have their crews there. And then, of course, things like mechanical and PTC. What I'll note here is mechanical issues, of course, are addressed if we're proactively maintaining the fleet and minimizing how many mechanical issues we have. PTC is a good example of where the data only shows you so much. So if somebody says, oh, it was a PTC issue, that's just the last thing that has to happen in a line of things that has to happen to get the train out of Washington. So if they're waiting for PTC to initialize and it was something like 5 steps before that caused the delay and it gets marked as PTC, this is where we have to watch the data. Was it really PTC having a problem, or did something in the line happen? So this is where the data gets us to a point where we're watching Washington, and then we go out on site, talk to people, and observe to find the real issues. And of course, VRE, midday storage, north of Washington, VRE has to go through the congestion in the afternoon. And so we can see here the departures, the Manassas line trains on the top, Fredericksburg on the top, Manassas on the bottom there. You can see the afternoon trains with the most red, meaning they're not hitting their departure times out of Washington, so they're starting off on the wrong foot. Of course, there are other issues that happen along the way for VRE service as well, but this is one of the ones at Washington we're watching. So that as we see from 1,000 minutes there on the left in July down to 350 in December, we see these improvements. We want to make sure VRE is continuing to share in the benefits of Amtrak's continuous improvement efforts. I don't have a huge chart for this one because there are infrastructure things that can't be shared. However, as you think of Union Station, you have tracks where the trains come in and board and alight passengers. As you continue into Virginia, those are K interlockings. Before you get into those tracks are K interlockings. We're only talking right now about A and K, and then there's a whole host of other alphabet interlockings, the massive yard. Our outages, the reason we keep having outages is the interlockings on both sides there affecting the trains coming in Virginia are having rehabilitation work. And so we had several in the fall. There we had some weekend cancellations. And so Amtrak's been coordinating with us that we have another one coming up at the end of January. The system has already cut off sales. We did that actually, I think, at the end of November. We have more coming up in February, March, and then May. And so we're trying to anticipate these so we don't have to cancel people's plans. We just cut off the sales in advance. And then this is one of the standard operating procedures we use. This seems to be the one we're going to try and look at preserving more service, but that would require some equipment into Virginia, servicing in Virginia. However, this is what the plan is using right now, which you can see the black dots at the bottom. It affects the Newport News service and the Brooklyn service when we have to implement mitigation measures.
But Ken, just want to make sure that there's a round trip to and from each location now. So
yeah, those are
train development, there's train Norfolk, so on and so forth. So people, they're more limited than.
And Amtrak's been really good about accommodating it.
Hello, this is DJ.
So I'll talk a little bit about the Floridian. So what was the Silver Star long distance train? It used to go from Florida to the Northeast Corridor up to New York became from Florida all the way to Chicago. This had a number of things about it that we were hoping would improve some things in Washington Union Station. The first one would be that it doesn't have an engine change. It stays diesel the whole time. So we were thinking this could be good. And they built in cushion in Washington in order to help with the schedule coming off of what are now both of the Amtrak Northeast Corridor. Amtrak controls it, but now they're going to be on host railroads on both sides. So they built in more cushion at Washington for recovery. So how's that doing? So far, not like we hoped. Yeah. So you look at the bottom here, Petersburg. You have the Floridian on the left and the Silver Star on the right. So coming in consistently more late into Petersburg. However, the median times it's about on average just as late. It's not like way more late when it shows up late. So I guess that's the silver lining there. And then southbound, what we're watching is, again, with that recovery in Washington and no engine change, we were hoping, even if it is going to perform worse, see 62% coming off of post railroads versus 89% coming off the Amtrak controlled Northeast Corridor, we're still not seeing it gain anything as it comes into Alexandria. So this is something we're watching with Amtrak. They acknowledge it, and so there's probably going to be some schedule adjustments to this near future. And I think on this one, what I'll just show you is we're watching it specifically in Virginia. So on the right side, you can see the northbound in Virginia. The Floridian is doing slightly better, or you could say on par, basically. And then southbound, the Floridian is doing worse. And we started looking at the delay codes there, and we've seen improvements. The Floridian is not getting held up as much. PTI is passenger train interference. So not as much passenger train interference with Floridian coming south in Virginia. However, freight train interference is way up on it. So that's something we need to watch with CSX and make sure that this new schedule is accommodated by dispatchers and any local trains or trains that are regularly scheduled out there.
Would you show the Floridian going all the way to Miami?
Yes, to Chicago.
Is that CSX track?
There's several other host railroads that has to traverse as well, but it does cross CSX and Florida. Interesting CSX.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize it went all the way to Miami.
Question, please. So when you talk about freight train interference, what is the remedy for that? You said we have to watch for that, but what is the actual remedy?
The main thing would be, it's probably a multi-pronged approach. We want to make sure dispatchers are aware of the schedule change and utilizing the network and crossovers, things like that efficiently. So I think that's the main thing, to make schedule adjustment. There also could be regularly scheduled CSX trains that we need to make sure that we're aware, everybody's aware, not just the dispatchers, but everybody's aware that this train's coming in later where somebody didn't expect it to come in at that time anymore. So there's just some scheduling that we have to socialize. I think is the main part. If that helps.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Jeremy, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, though, is that with the Amtrak long distance trains, though, is that we will have passengers that are leveraging, like that are traveling through Virginia, right? But the real impediment, right, is that delays here essentially get in the way of the trains that we're paying for, right? Am I understanding this correctly in terms of the problem?
Yes.
Yeah. And so are there ways to say that, or I guess, are there options that we can tell Amtrak is saying, hey, your long distance stuff, it's kind of a mess. Can you at least get out of our way so that it's not a mess for our stuff?
Yes, and it's complicated.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. It's one of these things, right? Is that like we all know that long distance, right, is a perennial problem for Amtrak, right? And it's like, how do we create a scenario where it's like that if we can truly, sidetrack, pun intended, right, this element, so that at least the stuff that we're paying for, we can offer a quality product.
So that's one of the reasons why we exist, is that I'm using your words.
Yes.
Long distance trains are a perennial problem. And the reason for that is because they travel over many, many freight roads for a long distance, and late trains only get later. And Jeremy said this earlier, but I'm going to say it a little more bluntly. What happens is with freight train interference is many times a freight train and a passenger train show up at the same time. And the dispatcher says, you know what? I work for CSX. I work for the freight railroad because it's all railroads. I work for the freight railroad. That's freight railroad train. That one goes first. That one's going to go about 35 miles an hour. We, whether it's a state-supported train or a long distance train, wants to go 79. And when that train's in front of us, we're going to call freight train interference. When we have our own infrastructure, and we spent a lot of money in the Commonwealth of Virginia to buy our own infrastructure. Our tracks are going to be passenger-only track. They're interoperable, so when there are problems, the freight train will go there. But in the future, because of the infrastructure that Virginia purchased, when that freight train shows up and the passenger train shows up at the same time, freight train's going to go on the freight track, passenger train's going on the passenger track, and then that problem will be much less frequent.
DJ, will it be as clear to the dispatcher in that scenario that they is saying, okay, I don't have to make this kind of subjective call now. It's going to be more quantitative versus qualitative.
It'll be clear to yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is those passenger dedicated tracks are passenger dedicated tracks, and they will be only used for freight in the event of an emergency of an atypical situation. And on the other side of that, the freight railroads are having a meeting today saying, oh, thank goodness the passenger trains are out of our way. We know this is a freight only track, and those passenger trains won't be on our track unless there's an atypical situation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Isn't it by law, DJ, that they're supposed to give the passenger?
Yeah.
So they have to pay a fine, right? If they decide to let the freight train have priority. So the passenger is supposed to have priority.
When Amtrak was created, part of the agreement of the government to let the freight companies give up passenger rail was Amtrak needs to have the ability to run on any freight track for incremental cost, and they should always have priority. You're exactly right, and this is DJ talking, not the executive director of the VPRA, just for clarity. The fine that they have to pay is much less than the bonus they get when they run FedEx or UPS on time. And so those decisions are made every day.
Can we go to Surfboard to complain, and isn't Norfolk Southern aren't they under suit from DOJ for failure of priority? I mean, we have resources other than, Jeremy is best in the nation on this. I'm certain of this. We have additional resources. Yeah. It doesn't have to be all on Jeremy's shoulders.
Yes, and we can go to the Surface Transportation Board. And in fact, the Surface Transportation Board last year created a passenger rail advisory committee to look at these exact issues. You're exactly right. The Department of Justice, I believe, is suing Norfolk Southern. There are a lot of initiatives across the government that are taking place to ensure that freights follow that law. And to their credit, they're coming to the table. And part of what, and I agree with what you said about Jeremy, I've told him that before. He doesn't believe me, he believes you. I don't get it. But that's part of why Virginia, set up these performance committees that have VPRA and CSX and Amtrak to talk about, hey.
Which is better than litigation any day.
Right. I'm not here to get lawyers rich. Sorry, Michael. It's better to sit down and say, Ms. Moses Ned reported that a freight train and a passenger train showed up at the same time, and you guys let the freight train go first. Why'd that happen? And what can we do together to make sure that does not happen again? We don't want to fight. We don't want to say, oh, you owe us $40 because you let the train go first. Yeah. We want to prevent the problem. And to date, there was a lot of turf war when we first started these committee meetings, but they started to be very productive. And the conversations, having the data is really 80% of the battle. Jeremy, did I say anything you disagree with?
No, this is a great conversation for you.
Oh, EJ.
Some of the points I might add to be that, yes, Amtrak is supposed to get preference. And there's debates about what that preference looks like. And the way I've heard it couched is it an ambulance where we hear it coming and we know we need to get out of the way? Or is it a presidential motorcade where we know it's coming and everything has to wait until it passes? So there's some debate in the industry about what preference looks like. And in reality, it looks more like an ambulance. And then you get into a congested network where it's trying to get up on the curb and go around it. But
right, the third piece of that, though, is it an ambulance? Is it a motorcade? Or is it just a fast car in the left lane that I should get out of the left lane and let it pass when I get a chance? Right? So
and speaking of that, because my question is, and I know, we have a very aggressive plan and it's going to take a long time and a lot of money. But on this topic of freight getting out of the way, what about the issue of sidings? What about the issue of Appomattox River Bridge? So that we create ways, because our passenger lanes are only like Richmond North. They're not south. So, but I guess that's like our plan B when we get down the road and have all our big projects done, to be looking at that, which would help everything.
Yeah, I would say Appomattox Bridge is a big project. It's just not part of phases 1 and 2.
Right.
You're right. The first, and when Transform Rail in Virginia was created, we didn't want to come in and say, hey, we need $18 billion to fix everything in Virginia. We wanted to say.
I get that, but I'm just saying that's a solution for what we're talking about when we get to the point we can do it, to build more. That's what we did for the Norfolk train, is we built those Norfolk Southern built those sidings to allow for the for the passenger trains to be running.
Right. And that's why in our project portfolio, I'm sorry, Mike, we have a siding here and a siding
Yeah.
here because there are choke points that CSX worked with us to identify. We said, look, if we want to alleviate congestion, here's where we need sidings. And selfishly, a lot of it was north of Spotsylvania because that's where we have 16 more trains. You know, that's where the VPRA service is. And
Right.
but
Well,
you're
that's
right.
right.
The eventual vision after phase 2 and 3 and 4 is to have that dedicated track everywhere.
Because we're talking about the Florida train, so that's going south. And then we've got the auto train.
Right.
So point, Brian, at Max River Bridge, we are close with North Carolina DOT and working through a $60 million CUSI grant received a few years ago. It needs to be obligated by the FRA. Mentioned the obligation Gary talked about language earlier. We agreement with North Carolina to focus on the Appomattox River Bridge portion so we can get 30% design so we can get an idea of what a true cost would be. As you know, you've been over it. It's not an easy project. It's pretty high up. You have to go from rock to rock to rock. I don't know if those are technical terms, but so it's
That Mike engineer.
So we are focused on that. That is the only single track in a double track area, to your point. So that is something that we hope to move forward in 2025 design for that.
Oh, wow, that's
We
good.
need that grant from the federal government though. And we just had a call in North Carolina earlier this week where they agreed that segment 2 of 6 segments, but that segment, including Appomattox River Bridge, we need to get a good idea of the cost estimate.
I'm glad I asked the question. That's very good news. Thank you.
Mr. Jay, I was just going to ask a question. So just looking out from the spokes of the wheel, the states that surround us, I mean, we're coordinated with this goal. So just using the Floridian line as an example, you know, is every state along that line following the same rules and putting the same priorities? Or are we going to each state house trying to get them to tinker a little bit on the edges to get them in line with what we're doing?
We have great partners in North Carolina. We have a great partner in Maryland. You'll find that in South Carolina and Georgia, just speaking of the Floridian, they're not as focused on passenger rail at this point. But North Carolina, we talk to, as Mike just alluded to, if not daily, certainly multiple times a week. And we make sure that everything we're doing aligns with what they're doing. Yeah. In fact, you look at the other states for a train that goes through Virginia, it's the Carolinian. And they want it to be on time as much as we do.
Yeah.
Sure. And it is one of the worst performers. So it has some reason. To that point, we have actually taken a lot of these charts and graphs and things that you see, and we have meetings of states several times a year. And the one we had last summer in Chicago, they gave me the pulpit to kind of show what Virginia is doing. And Amtrak's response to that was they showed up in Norfolk in September to say they are hiring resources to do similar efforts with other states, because it caught people's attention. I said, wait a minute, you need to start showing us. It's not always blame the freights. If I were to ask everybody what's the biggest problem for on-time performance in the RFP, which I've been doing over the past couple of years because I just want to kind of prove my point. Everybody thinks it's FTI, it's freight, and it's not. It was Washington Station, which is incorrect. The data pointed us to a different direction, and that's why it's such a success. Because Amtrak recognized it in the Service Performance Committee meetings, and they ate a little bit of crow, and they started working on it. So
Good for you.
yeah, so that was, and so it's been a real success. And I will also mention the Arkandale project recently completed. It's a third track of 9 miles that we're working with CSX dispatchers to make sure they utilize that. And so we've seen some successes where they start to weave trains around each other because of that 9 miles. I've also been on an Amtrak train stuck behind a VPRA train, wondering why they didn't weave us around it, but we're watching it closely and getting them used to it.
Jeremy, I wanted to
VPRA
add.
train stuck behind an Amtrak train. So
I just wanted to add that DRPT is also involved with the compact with North Carolina. And so that helps our ability to talk with the other states. That the North Carolina-Virginia compact has now included the Southeast Commission. Emily, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we have been in communication with them and have a grant from the federal government to do additional study into the Southeast. So that information on planning is obviously shared with VPRA.
Our relationship. So enough about the Floridian. A little more on FGI. not going to go through all the colors that you see on here. I look at the trends, the peaks and the valleys. So there were some hurricanes over the summer, and that actually ended up rerouting some freight traffic through Virginia. So when we look at July to August, we actually saw more FTI, partly because of some rerouted traffic from storms that were farther south. And then it started to come back down as things started to recover. But then CSX has anticipated more intermodal traffic during the holiday season, which picks up in November. FTI was expected to go up. We did see it go up, starting to come down in December. So we hope to see that trend continue to decline. But FTI, I guess, as Washington Union Station is improving, is starting to show up as another thing that we need to watch closely in order to see the benefits accumulate the trains all the way down to Norfolk and Newport News. Speaking of Norfolk Newport News and the Norfolk Southern portion that was greatly improved, as well as the service that is in Roanoke and will be extended to New River Valley. Our arrangement with Norfolk Southern allows us to start doing this with Norfolk Southern. So everything I just showed you is so everything in orange is where we are not doing it yet, and we're going to start that this year, hopefully as soon as next month. And the difference is our second Roanoke train has a premium paid for, basically the same as what VPRA pays for access. We pay a premium for that second Roanoke train, but we don't pay it in full if the on-time performance isn't up there. So we have a regime that will kick in as soon as Norfolk Southern finishes some of those construction projects. So what we've done here on the lower left is to just start mapping where we are today with our 75 to 84, 75. Where would we be discounting that rate? So we would be at about a 20% discount on the rate that we pay for that train. So what we're basically saying is we're now paying customer, we have priority, you have this much time. I don't care if CSX delivers an hour late, you have this much time between these cities to move that train. And we're paying a premium for it, or we start taking away money. So that's going to be part of the arrangement with Norfolk Southern when we start these. And that was negotiated through the Western Rail Initiative. And so less charts. Some good news here. Amtrak is going through procurements to replace their existing fleet. And so Virginia should start to see these benefits showing up in 2027.
I was just going to ask about the new train sets.
Yes, they're called Amtrak Aero. They are Siemens trains. So you see these on the Bright Line of Florida. They look similar to trains that are running in Germany today. Already we're seeing new locomotives from Siemens show up. Started using them on the long distance service when we had some issues with the locomotive serving in Virginia. Amtrak started using the new locomotives on Virginia service to improve our reliability. Anyway, this is a good news story. The first trains are promised to the Pacific Northwest. They will be tested on the Northeast Corridor this spring, probably throughout the year, and then they'll go out west. And then as things start to deliver on the Northeast Corridor, they will not show up en masse in Virginia. You're going to start seeing them kind of intermingled with the old sets as they ramp up delivery. And then hopefully by 2030, we should be at full Aero train sets in Virginia. We worked really hard with Amtrak to make sure their business case accommodated all the growth in Virginia. Their initial order accommodated all of our growth, because a lot of states it was only accommodating what's existing today.
Jeremy, other than the fact that they've got wider aisles, they're better for the customer, they're completely ADA accessible, why is the Aero train such a big deal in Washington, D.C.?
So they don't have a locomotive change yet.
Okay, that was my.
Motor.
Well,
Flowers actually knew that.
And for Virginia, where we typically have to fly the train, or you have to move it in a triangle to turn it around. These are push pull, so they'll have a cab and the locomotive, so we can just push back and forth, much more efficient.
They're MU.
Yes. And so when you trade in your 2010 Mazda for a 2025 hybrid, you have to upgrade all the service facilities because everything's different, right? Now a computer, it's not something you can just get a wrench and dip the left slash, hope it works. So when we look at the service facilities in Virginia, the New River Valley one is going to be funded by Virginia. We're going to build it to accommodate Aero at a minimum, but we are also looking at more space for Amtrak to come later with IIJA funds and upgrade with things like a pit or anything else they want. But we're going to do this one because of the tight timeline of Southern building it for us. This one's Virginia only, not federalized. However, with the expansion to 5 round trips of Richmond trains, we're going to be building a new facility at Fulton Yard in Virginia. We're working on a funding agreement where we want Amtrak to invest and pay for anything that's above what we would have done for the current equipment. So they have IIJA funds. We're working out a funding agreement for them to pay for their share. And then Amtrak, because we've already got stable, finished service facilities in Norfolk and Newport News, Amtrak will just do their improvements at those facilities with their IIJA funds. All right, That's my portion. So Zach Collier is going to come. So Zach Collier on our team is the one who manages all our access in the Amtrak system to pull up the data and everything that we have, do surveys, and he does a lot of work with every department in the agency. So he's going to talk a little bit about the rider program.
Good job, Jeremy. That was really good.
Yeah.
I'll just say Zach is a daily VRE writer, by the way. Zach and his wife, actually. So just wanted to that plug in.
They buy VRE daily
Yes.
to the Alexandria office.
Yeah. Spotsylvania.
Oh, wow.
You rode Amtrak with us today.
Say, good morning, all. Madam Chair, members of the board. As Jeremy mentioned, my name is Zach Collier. I'm a member of the operations team here at VPRA. I just want to give you all just a brief overview of the rider program that you and VPRA staff are able to participate in. And to first set the stage here, I just want to give a bit of background as to why we're doing this. We work with Amtrak, work to develop a customer service standards agreement. And over the last year, together many different departments at Amtrak, mechanical, transportation, onboard services, folks at VPRA, to set up the standards that hopefully ensure these consistent service for our passengers forwards. And so what what I want to drive home the point here is that you're able to access the survey, and you'll see a number of points here: cleanliness, on-time performance, customer experience. And it's important as board members, as you represent multiple parts of the state, we'll get feedback from folks in Northern Virginia, feedback from folks in Western Virginia, hopefully Central and Southern, all over. And it's a great tool to sort of collect real-time feedback and sort of work with Amtrak to capture those pain points. I just want to stress here that this is not really a punitive effort. It is not a punitive effort. It's a partnership program with Amtrak. And the focus here is across the state, not just those major corridors. Another point I'd like to make here with the customer service standards is that if you're a new-time, first-time rider, it's important to get your feedback because that first impression really does make a difference. About 30% of our riders on a monthly basis are first-time riders. And so it's important that we have that level set, quality assured service, each and every time. And if you're a more seasoned rider, it's important to see what you notice between trips, small and large. And so what you'll have, how you can get access to this survey, is there's a small business card in the Ford packet with the QR code and a URL link. You'll be able to either scan that QR code or enter it in on your laptop, any mobile device, and get access to the survey. That link will remain the same. So you can go ahead and favorite that and bookmark it. It will, of course, be available at lunch or after the board meeting, should you have any questions about access. And that survey is readily available for your onboard experience and at the stations. So as you can see, the survey platform allows you to take pictures. So good, bad, and indifferent. We would love your feedback as you travel across the state. We've had about just under half of VPRA staff in this program over the last year, which is good feedback. And it's important to just continually get that real time. So for next steps here, of course, we continue to coordinate with Amtrak and resolve those outstanding items. This is absolutely a continuous improvement effort where we are updating the questions, adding questions, removing questions, and recently republished the second version of the survey in December. And, as owners and operators of the Amtrak service, it truly is important to ensure that we are able to turn around these responses and help out anything. So with that, I'll encourage you to take pictures, utilize those free response text boxes, turn those anecdotes into data. And again, we'll be available at lunch or after the meeting, should you all have any questions. So that I will turn it back over. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question, Zach? Where do passengers get this card, or do we have QR? Do we have the QRs on the wall or something in the train?
So this would be just for an internal program that you, as a board member, for VPRA board members and VPRA staff can take part in.
Oh, okay. It's not for the passengers yet.
No. They do help for CSI score, customer satisfaction index. And so let's just say every 10% of the passengers that travel, they'll be given a survey, not the same survey, but a similar survey. So this just allows us to get, the feedback from.
I gotcha. Does VRE have this type of program in place? It's a good idea.
That's terrible.
I think it's a great idea for.
So I would add one other point to this sort of program. It is very important for us to collect data. As a rider, it's easy to pick out what's going wrong or what's not so good, but this is an equally great opportunity to catch folks doing things the right way. So if the announcements are clear and work really well, if the cafe car had plenty of seating, whatever the opportunity might be. So Zach mentioned it earlier, it's not a gotcha, it's a mutual partnership, and that includes both opportunities for improvement, but also add boys, add girls.
I promise you, when onboard staff hear from management that they got a compliment from a survey, they repeat that positive behavior. That goes a long.
But my question, but it's incumbent upon Amtrak to make the improvement, correct?
Correct. So we gather the data and we meet with them on a regular basis. And say, hey, here are the things we found that are good. Here are the things we found that need some improvement.
And do they respond?
They've been very responsive.
Okay, good.
That's part of the customer service standards agreement that we signed, and we actually rate them on a monthly and quarterly basis on how they're doing. And we set standards on cleanliness, on Wi-Fi, on 15 or 17 for Washington, D.C. performance. And they've been very responsive because they're held accountable for that.
Oh, it's really well done. That's great.
Again, not to channel the stores, but that's all Jeremy. We just let
That Jeremy, yeah, idea.
next time we're putting you at the end though, because
I did take photos by chance on the train here. I'll show them to you at lunch, Jeremy. I didn't even know this was a thing.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's good.
Thank you, Zach. Any other questions? Concerns update? So assuming we are ahead of schedule today, assuming that lunch is available.
It's supposed to be delivered at noon.
Okay.
I don't know if it's out there yet,
I know a way to find out.
but
We'll check.
I know the
Hang tight.
Venezuela is on time.
for the vendors coming in. So
Okay, so I'm debating what time to make sure we're back.
it was good.
As everybody can see by the agenda, we're going to break for lunch and then everyone's going to return and go into closed session. But we need everybody to return so that we can read our agreement in before we go into closed session. So with that, we are going to go ahead and recess for lunch. It should be here since it's supposed to be here by noon. I'm going to ask everybody to be back. Let's say 12:40. We will resume and go into closed session when we come back at 12:40. So with that, we are in recess. Thank you.
It was, Sandy, it was good. It was,
Is it clean?
clean, which was,
That's important.
a little bit tough. So tight. I couldn't. It was like there's a lot of people out of
Yeah.
which I just was not expecting, especially because that staff was something out.